So I thought I'd run through a few of the modifications that I've done to my old Trident. As you've probably seen from other videos, or you may have seen from other videos that I've got on my YouTube channel, I acquired this bike as a box of bits in, I think it was about 2016. I've known the bike a long time. It was owned by somebody I know, and I used to remember it on the road about 40 years ago. But the guy who owned it took it off the road in about 1980 or 81, and took it all to bits and stored most of it in the loft of his house. I don't know what his intention was. Anyway, there it remained in pieces for about 40 years until I acquired it and put it all back together over, I think it probably took me about a month or so working on and off. It didn't take long. Fortunately, he was an engineer, so when he stored all the parts, he did it all logically. All the bits and pieces were bagged up pretty logically, and anyway, here it is. Since then I've used it quite a few times over the years. Since I've been riding bikes, I started in 1970. I've owned a lot of British bikes, and I've owned, I think, 4 or 5 Tridents in that time, a couple of T160s and a couple of T150s. My first Trident was a new T160 that I bought in 1977. It was old stock, brand new, and I loved it. But as time's passed on, I've come to like the T150s better. So anyway, here we are. So I like to do. I've always enjoyed doing touring on my Triumphs. I've had T140s and T1, and I've had Triumph Twins, T140s, and Triumph Triples, and I've toured on both of them, and I have done some touring on this one. I've been over in Europe a few times on it, and it's been a great bike. So I've carried out a few modifications to it to enhance that. So starting off with the electrics, the Zener diode failed one day when I was out for a ride with a friend, and so that prompted me to improve the charging system a bit, and I bought a Lucas 3-phase 180 watt alternator and a Boyer power box. The power box I've mounted on the back mud guard under the seat. You can't see it, I'll just open the seat, but there's nothing to see because it's buried right down below the coil plates there, behind the battery. So that's buried, but it's there. And as I say, we've got the Lucas 3-phase stator as well, so that gives me a slight improvement in power output over the original alternator that was on there, which was an old, I don't know whether it was the original alternator, but there was a 2-wire alternator on there instead of a 3-wire one. So that was the mod I did there. And then the other electrical modification it had before I owned it was the previous owner had put a Boyer ignition system on it. So that's still on there, so that's well over 40 years old, and it's still going. I added some Lucas 4-volt coils. It had the guy who originally had it had put 6-volt coils on, but I put Lucas 4-volt coils on just to improve the ignition a wee bit. And that functions fine. It's a pretty standard. I know there are other electronic ignition systems around nowadays that people like, but I'm happy to carry on using the Boyle one. I've got a spare ignition module that I carry around with me. So that's the ignition. The headlamp I put a Sibi headlamp lens in. The original headlamp reflector was had lost its shine, so I put a Sibi headlamp on, which is supposed to be better than the original Lucas one, and I've also put in a Philips Vision Plus headlamp, halogen headlamp bulb, which I have on one of my other bikes, and I really like them. They're a good quality bulb, and give a good pattern of beam. So that's that. And then the engine. Well, I've haven't done a lot to that, but when I was building the engine, I put valve stem oil seals on when I put new valve guides in, and I put Gertz piston rings on when I built it, mainly because the original piston rings, a couple of them were missing. So after I measured up the bore and found that to be in good nick, still running on standard bores, I just honed them and put a set of Gertz piston rings in. And then more recently, I've put a high output oil pump in. So that's, as most of you will probably know, the oil pump is mounted on the inner primary chain case, and so that's all fitted, and that's the only mods I've done to the engine. At some stage, perhaps the engine will come out again, and I'll perhaps maybe consider doing more modifications to it. And the transmission, I've got a self-centering clutch pull rod. After the original clutch bearing seized and snapped the pull rod, so I put a self-centering pull rod in there, and I also put in a clutch bearing, clutch lift or clutch release bearing from LP Williams, which was an upgrade from the stock one, and I'm happy with both of those. I don't have any trouble at all with the clutch. I know Tridents have a bit of a reputation for not clearing the clutch properly, but I've set my one up and it works fine. I can select neutral from a standstill without any trouble, and that continues to work satisfactorily. The clutch lever has also been modified. I'm not sure because it came like this, but it's gives me a longer throw than the stock clutch lever, because I believe the distance from the centre of the pivot to the centre of where the cable is slightly longer, and that means that it pulls on the cable slightly more than the stock setup. I don't know, this was done to the bike before I acquired it, so I don't know what the clutch lever is off, but it's certainly off another British bike. Moving on to the dash, well, you can see here that my dash is quite a different layout to stock. I've modified the headlamp so that to take an ammeter, because I do like to have plenty of feedback when I'm riding, so I put an ammeter in the headlight, and as you can see, I've still got the warning lights there, but the flasher warning light is not in the normal position, but I get a good view of that when I'm riding. And then moving down, I've changed the instrument holders to this aluminium one, and that also has an oil pressure gauge mounted in it. All works very satisfactorily. I'm very pleased with the layout of the instrument panel. I think that's a good improvement. The headlight modification, I had to get a different shell to do this modification, because the warning lights were too close together to be able to get the ammeter in between. So that, I think, is a headlamp shell from a 650 twin, and then I added that came with two warning lights in it, and I added the extra warning light hole for the indicators. Then the brakes. So the brakes, I've put Brady brake hose on, and as you can see, I also have a larger disc set up. Thing I had with the disc was that the original disc, which, as you probably know, they were chrome plated, and as the chrome wears off, you get all sorts of strange behaviour from the brakes, because the chrome has a different friction coefficient to the steel that's underneath, so it tends to bite and then release, and bite and release as you're applying the brakes. I tried to get the chrome taken off, but that was going to work out being expensive. So then I bought a replacement disc, and the thing I found with the replacement disc is that they're slightly smaller than the original disc. The original disc has a 10-inch diameter, and the replacement discs that are available, and I tried a couple from different sources, but or from different shops, but they all seem to come from the same source. The replacement disc I found was 9 3/4 inches, and that left a bit of the brake pads sticking over the edge of the disc, which wasn't very satisfactory. So I sent that back and ended up putting on this Norman Hyde disc brake conversion, which I think looks really nice, and it works really well. It's got a Lockheed Racing caliper and a larger diameter disc, and it's a great setup, and I'm very happy with that. Suspension wise, we've got standard forks. Well, I think the forks have got progressive springs in, and I fitted a damper modification, a modified damper assembly that came from 3D motorcycles, and that's a good improvement. So the damper the internals of the slider, as I say, are modified, and then as you can see, I've also got a fork brace on there, which also helps with the handling. And then at the back I've got Hagen rear dampers, which are probably exact copies of the original Girlings. I don't know, but anyway, it all works perfectly adequately for me. Okay, so that's and the other thing that you can see there is that there's a lifting handle that I put on that makes it a lot easier to get it on the centre stand. And something else that I did, you can see, I'll get down here, is that I strengthened the centre stand to stop it from distorting. So the centre stand has been braced to improve the rigidity of the stand. And then you can also see that I've got T150, early T150 exhaust system on there. That's on there because I like the sound of it, and the original silencers when I acquired or the original exhaust system when I acquired the bike was rotten. So that's why I did that. Other things that I have done and changed back again were the footrests. I put a set of rear sets on and a set of M handlebars, but I couldn't get on with them, so I took them off again and converted it back to stock. I always find on Triumphs, or certainly Triumphs of the 70s anyway, that the footrests are a bit too far forward for my liking, but there we are. That's what it is. I guess if it had export bars on the front and with a more sit-up posture, then probably the footrest position would be about right. From what I remember, I did once have a T140 with an export T140, and that did seem to be a much better setup. But of course, it's not very good if you're travelling at any sort of speed, or for a period of time. Okay, well, that's just a quick video that shows the modifications that I've done to the Trident